the first thing I noticed was the scent. A sweet floral perfume on his collar. Nothing like my simple lavender soap. In our warm kitchen, my fingers froze on the fabric. The world shrank to that small white tag and the hollow space opening inside my chest. In that single quiet moment, I knew my life was over and the man I built it with was a stranger. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. My name is Clara. I was 42 years old when my life quietly unraveled. For nearly 20 years, my world was built around a simple, sturdy foundation. My husband, David. We met in our early 20s, two kids fresh out of college, dizzy with dreams and that fierce young love that feels like it can power a city. He was an ambitious, bright-eyed architect, and I was going to be a writer. I had notebooks filled with stories, ideas for novels, a head full of sentences. But life, as it often does, had other, gentler plans. We got married. We bought a small, fixer-upper house with a garden that promised future roses. Money was tight, a constant low-grade worry. We'd eat beans on toast for a week to afford a nice bottle of wine for a Friday night. We'd lie on the floor of our bare living room surrounded by paint cans and just talk for hours. About everything. About the children we wanted, the places we'd travel, the home we would build together, not just with wood and nails, but with memories. I remember tracing the lines on his palm and feeling like I could see our entire future mapped out there. It was safe. It was certain. When our daughter, Sophie, was born, my priorities shifted with a beautiful, profound force. The late-night writing sessions were replaced with late-night feedings. The novels in my head were gently shelved for picture books and lullabies. I didn't see it as a sacrifice, not then. I saw it as a choice for our family. David's career was taking off. His designs were getting noticed. He worked long hours, and I wanted to be the anchor, the warm, steady light he could always come home to. I managed the house, the bills, Sophie's school life, our social calendar. I was the one who remembered his mother's birthday, who knew exactly how he liked his coffee, who mended the tiny tear in his favorite suit jacket. As the years passed, his success grew. The small architectural firm became a well-known name. The fixer-upper was sold, and we moved into a beautiful, modern house. It was all glass and sharp angles, a far cry from the cozy, cluttered home we'd started in. His suits became more expensive. His watch cost more than our first car. And I stayed Clara. I volunteered at the school, had coffee with the other moms, kept our beautiful, sterile house perfectly clean. My world became smaller, but I told myself it was deeper. It was about depth, not breadth. I was building a life, a good life, for the three of us. But a quiet distance had begun to grow. It was subtle at first. He'd miss a parent-teacher conference. He'd be on his phone during dinner, his thumb scrolling through emails while Sophie told him about her day. He started talking about legacy and brand presence. The man who used to lie on the floor with me now cared deeply about the thread count of his sheets. I felt a shift, a slight tilt in the balance of our world. I was the familiar, comfortable piece of furniture in the corner of his dazzling new life. I was part of the backdrop. I think that was my fault line. My quiet pride in our history, my deep-seated belief that our early struggling love was the truest love. I felt a sense of entitlement to his loyalty, not because I demanded it, but because I believed I had earned it through years of quiet support. I looked at the women he sometimes worked with, women in sharp blazers with confident laughs, and I would feel a small, secret superiority. They don't know him like I do, I think. They haven't seen him eat beans on toast. They haven't built a life with him from the ground up. That pride, that quiet sense of being the foundation of his world made me blind. It made me safe. It made me weak. The trigger wasn't a grand fight or a dramatic scene. It was a series of small things, like drops of water slowly wearing away stone. He was traveling more for work, a conference in Chicago, a client meeting in Denver. He'd always call to say goodnight, his voice echoing slightly in what I imagined was a sterile hotel room. But the calls got shorter, more distracted. Then, the Thursday, he was supposed to be at a team dinner. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after a solitary dinner. Sophie was at a friend's for a sleepover. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. He came home earlier than I expected. He walked in loosening his tie, a smile on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. He leaned in to kiss my cheek, a habitual absent-minded gesture, and that's when I smelled it, that sweet, foreign perfume. It was clinging to the collar of his crisp white shirt, right near his neck. It was intimate. It wasn't a scent you'd get from a casual hug in a restaurant. This was close. This was personal. My heart didn't hammer. It didn't race. It just sank, like a stone dropped into a deep, cold well. I felt the blood drain from my face. I must have gone still because he pulled back and looked at me. "You okay, Clara? You look pale." I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my mind racing, trying to find any other explanation. A colleague wearing strong perfume? Someone at the bar? But it was on his collar. He followed my gaze to his shoulder, and for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something, panic, crossed his face. It was gone so fast I almost thought I imagined it. Then he shrugged, a careless, easy movement. "Must have been from that crowded bar," he said, his voice perfectly normal. Some woman brushed past me. People wear such strong stuff these days. He said it so easily, so smoothly. And the truly terrifying part was that the old me, the Clara from a month ago, would have believed him. She would have nodded, worried about his long day, and asked if he wanted a cup of tea. But that Clara was gone. In her place was a woman standing in a silent, too bright kitchen, looking at her husband of 18 years and seeing a liar. He hung his jacket and walked upstairs whistling a tune I didn't recognize. I stood there, my hand still tingling from the touch of his shirt. The warm, familiar kitchen now felt like a stage set. Everything was the same, but everything was different. The foundation of my life, the one I had poured my whole soul into, had just developed a crack so deep, I knew it could never truly be repaired. The days after that Thursday felt like walking through thick fog. I moved through my routines, making breakfast, packing Sophie's lunch, doing the laundry, but it was all automatic. My mind was somewhere else, trapped in that moment in the kitchen. The scent of that perfume seemed to have permanently lodged itself in my senses. I'd catch a phantom whiff of it in the car, in our bedroom, and my stomach would clench. I started watching him, not in a dramatic spy movie way. It was in the small, quiet spaces of our life together. I noticed how his phone, which used to be left carelessly on the countertop, was now always face down or in his pocket. I saw how he'd angle the screen away from me when he typed a message. He had a new passcode. For 18 years, we'd known each other's passcodes. It was a simple, practical thing. In case of an emergency, we'd said. Now, his phone was a sealed black rectangle, a little fortress of secrets he carried with him. He started working later again. "A new project," he said one evening, not meeting my eyes. "A very demanding client. It's a huge account for the firm." He sounded so convincing, so full of the weary pride of a provider. The old Clara would have felt a pang of sympathy. She would have rubbed his shoulders and told him not to work too hard. The new Clara just nodded. "I understand," I said, my voice calm, but inside a cold, hard knot was forming. I decided to check the phone bill. It was something I'd never felt the need to do before. We had a shared family plan. I logged in online, my heart thudding dully against my ribs. There it was, a phone number. Not a contact, just a string of digits. It appeared dozens of times, late-night calls, some lasting over an hour, calls during the day when he was supposedly in meetings. There was a pattern to them. They often happened just before he left the office, and sometimes very early in the morning before he came downstairs for coffee. I wrote the number down on a small scrap of paper, my hand trembling slightly. It felt like I was holding a live wire. This was no longer a suspicion. This was evidence. A cold, digital trail leading straight to the heart of my betrayal. The first major incident happened 2 weeks later. It was our wedding anniversary. 18 years. He had always made a fuss about it. Even in the lean years, he'd bring home a single perfect flower and cook me a messy, heartfelt dinner. This year, he forgot. Completely. I had made a reservation at the small Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date. I put on a dress I knew he liked. I even felt a flicker of the old hope, a desperate wish that I was wrong, that it was all a terrible misunderstanding. I waited and waited. The clock ticked past the reservation time. Sophie was at a study group. The house was silent. He finally walked in at 9:30, looking tired but cheerful. He dropped his briefcase by the door. Long day, he sighed, heading for the fridge. I was sitting at the dining table, a single candle burning in the center. "David," I said, my voice quiet in the large room. He turned, a bottle of water in his hand. He looked at me, at the candle, at my dress, and I saw the exact moment he remembered. His face went slack with shock, then immediately tightened with guilt and deflection. "Oh, Clara, God, I'm so sorry. The Henderson account, it just blew up today. Meetings back to back. I completely lost track of time." He came over, his arms open for a hug. "We'll go out this weekend, I promise. I'll make it up to you." But I didn't move. I just looked at him. I saw the performance now, the wide, sincere eyes, the regretful tone. It was all a script, and I wasn't his audience anymore. I was the stagehand, watching from the wings, seeing all the machinery behind the show. "It's fine," I said, blowing out the candle. The wisp of smoke rose between us, a fragile gray ghost. "It's just a day." He looked relieved. He thought he had gotten away with it. But that night, lying beside him in our king-size bed, the space between us felt like a canyon. I stared at the ceiling and I knew. The woman on the other end of that phone number, she had gotten his attention, his energy, his secret smiles. She had gotten my anniversary. The financial strain began to reveal itself in tiny, paper-cut ways. I was the one who managed the household accounts, but David handled his business finances and our main joint savings. I noticed he was being vague about money. I'd mentioned needing to repaint the exterior of the house, and he'd wave a hand. "Not right now, Clara. Cash flow is a bit tight at the firm. We need to be careful." But he just bought a new, very expensive watch. When I asked about it, he called it an investment. Clients noticed these things. It felt wrong. I started looking more closely at the bank statements I had access to. There were larger than usual transfers out of our joint account, labeled vaguely as business expenses or investments. One was for $5,000, another for $3,000. They were always round numbers, nothing you could pin to a specific purchase. One Saturday, I was cleaning out his car, a task I'd done for years, and I found a receipt tucked deep under the passenger seat. It was from a jewelry store in the city, a place I knew was far too fancy for him to ever buy anything for me. The receipt was for a necklace, a diamond pendant. The price made my breath catch. It had been bought 3 weeks ago. I never received a necklace. I sat there in the driver's seat of his car, parked in our own garage, and I held that small piece of paper. It felt heavier than a brick. This was no longer just emotional, it was financial. He was spending our money, the money we had saved together for Sophie's college, for our future, on her. The concrete reality of it was a physical blow. The life we had built wasn't just being abandoned, it was being dismantled brick by brick, and the resources were being carried away to build a new one for someone else. The loneliness during this time was a physical ache. It was the silence of the house during the day. It was sitting at the dinner table with Sophie and David, making polite conversation, feeling like an actor in a play about a happy family. It was the weight of the secret I was carrying. Who could I tell? My friends were also his friends. My family adored him. To say it out loud would make it real. It would shatter the perfect picture of our life that everyone saw. So I smiled. I nodded. I said, David's just so busy with work. And I saw the sympathy in their eyes. Sympathy for him, for his stress. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. My private life became a series of small, sad rituals. I'd wait for him to fall asleep, then I'd get up and go to the living room. I'd sit in the dark, looking out at the manicured lawn, and just breathe. I'd look at photos of us from years ago, our faces young and open, so full of a future we believed in. I felt like a ghost in my own home, haunting the spaces of a life that was already over. The house was no longer a home. It was just a beautiful, empty shell. And I was the last one left inside, waiting for the walls to finally cave in.
The reveal didn't come from a dramatic confrontation. It didn't come from me hiring a detective or snooping through his emails. It came on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning because that's when the most profound earthquakes in life often happen. Not with a storm, but with a quiet shift in the earth. David was rushing out the door for another early client meeting. His laptop bag was slung over his shoulder, and he was patting his pockets, looking for his keys. In his hurry, his wallet slipped from his back pocket and fell onto the tiled floor of the hallway. It splayed open. Coins rolled everywhere. "I've got it. Go," I said, my voice calm. He flashed me a grateful, distracted smile. "You're a lifesaver, Clara. Love you." And he was out the door. The sound of his car engine faded down the street. I knelt down on the cool tiles. I started gathering the coins. My fingers brushed against the soft, worn leather of his wallet. And that's when I saw it. Tucked into a hidden slot behind his credit cards wasn't a business card or a receipt. It was a photograph. It was a small square instant photo, the kind from one of those trendy, nostalgic cameras. My heart stopped. I slowly pulled it out. It was a picture of David and a woman. They were sitting at an outdoor cafe table under a string of lights. He had his arm around her shoulders. He was looking at her, and he was laughing. It wasn't his polite dinner party laugh. It was his real from-the-gut laugh, the one I hadn't seen in years. His whole face was lit up with it, and she was looking up at him, her face young, so young and radiant. She had long dark hair and was wearing a simple white t-shirt. And around her neck, sparkling even in the small photo, was the diamond pendant, my $5,000 ghost. I sat back on my heels, the cold from the tiles seeping through my pants. I stared at that little square of paper. It wasn't just the proof of the affair. It was the proof of his happiness, his genuine, uncomplicated joy. He wasn't just entangled in a sordid secret. He was in love. He had a whole other life, a life of sunny cafes and easy laughter, a life where he was a younger, happier man. I had been focusing on the betrayal, the lies, but I hadn't let myself consider the most painful truth, that he had emotionally left me a long, long time ago. The photo reframed everything. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This wasn't a stumble. This was a migration. He had slowly, methodically moved his heart from one home to another, and I was still living in the empty one, dusting the furniture and watering the plants, not realizing the owner had already left. The power balance didn't just tilt, it shattered. I had been fighting for a marriage. He had already ended it. I held the photo for a long time. I memorized her face. I memorized the shape of his smile. Then I did something strange. I didn't tear it up. I didn't throw it away. I carefully, precisely, slid it back into the hidden slot of his wallet. The woman who got up from the hallway floor was not the same woman who had knelt down. The fog of grief and confusion had lifted, burned away by the sharp, clear light of that photograph. I felt a strange, cold calm. The tears were gone.
In their place was a quiet, steely resolve. I was no longer a victim of this story. I was about to become its author. My first move was information. Knowledge is power, they say, and I had been powerless for too long. I went to my laptop, my hands steady. I opened a private browsing window. I typed the phone number from the bill into a search engine. Nothing. Then I tried a people search website, one I'd seen advertised on TV. I entered the number, and there it was. A name, Alara, and an address, an apartment in a trendy part of the city, about 40 minutes away. Alara. The name echoed in my mind. It was as beautiful and exotic as the perfume she wore. I wrote it down in a small, plain notebook I had taken from Sophie's school supplies. On the first page, I wrote the date. This was day 1. My plan was not about revenge. It was not about hurting him or her. It was about survival. It was about protecting what was left of my life and, most importantly, protecting Sophie. I needed to secure a future for us. And to do that, I needed to be smart, I needed to be legal, and I needed to be untouchable. I started with a secret bank account. The next day, I went to a different bank, one we didn't use, in a town a few miles over. I opened a savings account in my name only. I started small. I began skimming a little cash back from the grocery shopping. I sold some old books and a piece of jewelry my mother had given me that had no sentimental value. I deposited it all. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was my escape fund, my freedom fund. Next, I needed a lawyer, but I couldn't just call one. David knew everyone. I had to be discreet. I remembered a woman, Sarah, from my old book club years ago. She had gone through a messy divorce and had spoken highly of her lawyer. I found her on social media and sent her a private message. I was vague. An old friend is going through a tough time. Could I possibly get the name of your lawyer? Just for some initial advice. She sent it to me without question. I stored the name and number in my secret notebook. The most important and most painful task was gathering evidence. I became a silent archivist of my own betrayal. I began taking pictures of the bank statements with my phone, focusing on the suspicious transfers. I found a few more receipts in his car for expensive dinners, for hotel parking garages. I photographed them all. I noted down dates and times he was late, dates he was traveling. I cross-referenced them with the phone bill calls to Alara's number. It all lined up, a perfect, painful map of his double life. I did all of this with a detached, clinical efficiency. It hurt. Of course it hurt. Every piece of evidence was a fresh cut, but I didn't let the pain paralyze me. I used it as fuel. This was my job now, my most important job. I also started to quietly change my own life. I began seeing a therapist. I told David it was for menopause anxiety. He barely looked up from his phone. "Good idea, honey," he'd mumbled. Those weekly sessions were my lifeline. It was the only place I could say the words out loud. My husband is having an affair. My therapist, a kind older woman named Dr. Evans, helped me stay grounded. She told me my plan was smart. She told me to be patient. She told me my feelings were valid. I started taking long walks every day. I needed to get out of that beautiful, silent house. I needed to feel my body move, to breathe air that wasn't filled with his lies. On these walks, I would plan. I thought about timing. I knew I couldn't confront him until I had everything in place, until I had spoken to the lawyer, until my secret account had a little more in it, until I had found a place for Sophie and me to live. I was a general preparing for a battle I never wanted to fight, but I was ready. I was composed. I was quiet. And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of strength. It was small, like the first ember in a cold fireplace, but I was going to nurture it. I was going to make it into a fire that would keep my daughter and me warm through the long winter that was coming. The climax of my story did not happen in a courtroom. It did not happen with screaming or thrown plates. It happened at our own kitchen table, on a Sunday evening with the soft hum of the dishwasher in the background. It was quiet, and it was final. Sophie was at a friend's house working on a school project. The house was still. I had planned for this. All my documents were in order. The lawyer had been consulted. My evidence was compiled in a simple beige folder. My secret bank account, while not large, existed. I had looked at a small 2-bedroom apartment for rent near Sophie's school. I was ready. David was scrolling through his phone, a half-empty cup of coffee beside him. He seemed relaxed, oblivious. He had started talking about a business trip to a coastal town the following weekend, a town I knew, from a receipt I'd found, had a beautiful, romantic seaside inn. I took a deep breath. The air felt clean in my lungs. I walked over to the table and placed the beige folder in front of him, right next to his coffee cup. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "What's this?" "It's for you," I said, my voice calm and even. "I think you should look at it." He sighed, putting his phone down with an air of long suffering. He opened the folder. The first thing he saw was the photograph, the one of him and Ilara laughing at the cafe. His face went pale. He didn't say a word. He just stared at it. Then he slowly started to turn the pages. He saw the printed phone records, the numbers highlighted. He saw the photos of the receipts, the jewelry store, the hotel parking, the expensive dinners. He saw the printed copies of the bank transfers. The silence in the room was heavy, absolute. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I just stood there, watching him, watching the realization dawn on his face. There was no denying it, no excuse he could possibly make. The evidence was too complete. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were wide, shocked. But there was something else there, too. Not just guilt, but a flicker of fear. He was afraid of me, of this calm, collected version of me he had never seen before. "Clara," he began, his voice a hoarse whisper. I didn't let him finish. "I know everything, David," I said, my tone still quiet but firm. "I know about Ilara. I know about the necklace. I know about the money. I know about the life you've been building with her." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked from the folder to my face and back again. The power in the room had completely shifted. He was exposed, he was cornered, and he knew it. "I've spoken to a lawyer," I continued, as if I were discussing the grocery list. "Her name is Anya Sharma. Her card is in the folder. You'll be hearing from her this week. I would like you to stay in a hotel tonight. I think it's best for everyone." He just stared at me, utterly defeated. There was no fight left in him. The confrontation he had probably imagined, the tears, the yelling, the drama, hadn't happened. Instead, he was faced with my unshakable, quiet resolve. It was more powerful than any anger could ever be. He slowly nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just stood up, his movements slow and heavy like an old man. He walked out of the kitchen. A few minutes later, I heard him packing a bag upstairs. Then the sound of the front door closing. It wasn't a slam. It was a soft, definitive click. The sound of a chapter ending. I stood alone in the kitchen. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I felt quiet. The battle was over, and I had won. My freedom. The aftermath was not easy, of course. There were lawyers and paperwork and the painful process of telling Sophie. We sat her down together in that same quiet house, and we told her the truth in a way she could understand, that Mommy and Daddy loved her very much, but we couldn't live together anymore. It was the hardest conversation of my life, but we got through it. David moved in with Alara. The beautiful modern house was sold. The profit was split, as per the divorce agreement. My lawyer, Anya, was a pit bull. Because of the evidence I provided, the financial infidelity, the secret life, the settlement was fair. More than fair. I got what I needed to start over. Sophie and I moved into the small 2-bedroom apartment. It was nothing like our old house. The rooms were smaller. The windows looked out onto another building, not a garden. But it was ours. It was safe. It was honest. We painted her room her favorite color. We baked cookies, and the smell filled the whole place. It felt like a home. I started writing again, just for myself at first. Little snippets of my day, memories of my childhood. Then slowly I began to weave a story. It wasn't the story of my betrayal. It was the story of what came after. The story of rebuilding. I saw David occasionally when he picked up Sophie. He looked older. The relationship with Alara, I heard through the grapevine, did not last. The thrill of a secret couldn't survive the mundane reality of everyday life. I felt no joy in hearing that. I felt a quiet sadness for him. He had traded a real, if imperfect, life for a fantasy. And in the end, he was left with nothing. I set a boundary with him. We were polite, for Sophie's sake, but we were not friends. The trust was gone, and some things can never be rebuilt. And that was okay. I had made my peace with it. There was a small act of grace, one I didn't plan. When he moved out, he left a box of his things in the garage by mistake. In it was a sweater I had knitted for him in our first year of marriage. It was lumpy and misshapen, but he had worn it constantly. I could have thrown it away. I could have burned it. Instead, I washed it, folded it neatly, and mailed it to him, with no note. It wasn't a message of forgiveness. It was a message of release. I was letting go of the anger for my own sake. The moral of my story isn't that all men are untrustworthy. It isn't that love is a lie. The lesson I learned is quieter than that. It's about the person you become when the world falls apart. For so long, I thought my strength was in being the foundation for others, the supportive wife, the nurturing mother. But my true strength was discovered when that foundation crumbled. I found that I could be my own shelter. I could be my own architect. You can build a life with someone, pour your whole heart into it, and still have it taken from you. But they can never take your ability to build again. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to find a strength you didn't know you had, I'd be so grateful if you'd share your own thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to join me for more quiet stories of real life, please subscribe. It would mean the world to me.